Judge Prescott thought he could quiet Pam Bondi with a fine, but he never anticipated that she would tear apart his entire argument for all to see. The courthouse in Tampa, Florida, had witnessed plenty of legal showdowns, but on this particular morning, no one could have foreseen the storm that was about to erupt. Pam Bondi, as sharp as ever, stepped through the grand wooden doors, briefcase in one hand, the other adjusting the lapel of her blazer. This was supposed to be a routine hearing, the kind she could argue in her sleep. Yet, as she approached the defendant's table, she could already feel the judge's gaze on her before he even uttered a word. Judge Prescott, renowned for his no-nonsense attitude, wasn't looking at her face. Instead, his eyes were fixed on something just below her collarbone, a simple gold cross. The air in the courtroom shifted, an almost eerie stillness. Then, in a tone as sharp as a gavel's crack, Prescott cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Miss Bondi, I must remind you that religious symbols have no place in my courtroom." Pam barely reacted. "Your Honor, you're wearing a cross. That violates the neutrality of this space. Remove it, or you'll be fined." A murmur swept through the small group of spectators. The bailiff shifted, uncomfortable. The clerk darted a glance between the judge and Pam. This wasn't the first time a judge had tried to assert control over his courtroom in an unusual way. But finding a lawyer over a necklace? That was a first. Pam didn't move. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but my cross is no different than a wedding ring or a locket containing a family photo." Judge Prescott's face remained unreadable. "That's not how I see it," he said, exhaling as if already bored by the discussion. "Either remove it, or I'll have to fine you for violating courtroom neutrality." For the first time in her career, Pam Bondi was fined. Not for misconduct, not for a procedural mistake, but for wearing a piece of jewelry. The fine itself wasn't the issue. It was what it represented. Pam didn't take off the cross. Instead, she calmly placed her hands over her briefcase, her expression cool and unwavering. She wasn't letting this go. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to formally address this matter." Judge Prescott raised a brow. "Address it?"
"Yes."
"I'll be filing an objection and stating my argument on record." The judge smirked, glancing at the clock on the wall. "Miss Bondi, you're aware this hearing is about a business dispute, not your personal grievances."
Pam didn't flinch.
"I'm also aware that the First Amendment doesn't take a recess for personal opinions." That got his attention. He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keyboard. The tension in the room thickened, not over a contract dispute, but because a seasoned attorney had just challenged a judge's authority to his face. Pam knew she was walking a fine line, but backing down? That wasn't an option. "You're fining me for wearing a cross. Let's break that down legally, shall we?" The judge exhaled, rubbing his temples. But before he could respond, Pam was already reaching into her briefcase. She wasn't just here to argue. She was about to dismantle his entire premise. And Judge Prescott had no idea how deep of a hole he was digging for himself. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, placing it deliberately on the table. Every movement was calculated. Every second of silence was another tightening of the tension in the room. The judge sighed. "Miss Bondi, I don't have time for theatrics."
Pam didn't blink.
"Neither do I, Your Honor. But what I do have is a thorough understanding of constitutional law." Prescott leaned forward, fingers laced together, bracing for whatever was coming next. "You're fining me for wearing a cross, claiming it violates courtroom neutrality. Tell me, Your Honor, what legal precedent are you basing that on?" Silence. The court reporter's fingers hovered over the keys. The bailiff barely shifted. Judge Prescott inhaled slowly. "This courtroom operates under my authority, Miss Bondi." Pam nodded. "It does. But that authority isn't above the Constitution." She tapped the paper in front of her. "The First Amendment protects personal religious expression, especially when it does not disrupt proceedings." The judge scoffed. "You're an attorney, not a law professor." Pam smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Then let's discuss case law, shall we?" She lifted the paper. "Tinker v. Des Moines, 1969. A landmark case confirming that individuals do not shed their constitutional rights when entering a government institution, whether that's a school or a courtroom. Prescott's jaw tightened. He knew that case. Every lawyer did. Pam continued. West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett, 1943. The Supreme Court ruled that compelling individuals to remove or hide symbols of personal belief violates their First Amendment rights. She set the paper down. Now, Your Honor, would you like me to continue, or would you prefer to reconsider that fine? Prescott's fingers drummed against the armrest. He was cornered.
And he knew it.
But his pride wouldn't let him concede, not yet. This is not a religious debate, Miss Bondi. Pam tilted her head. Then why did you make it one? A few quiet gasps rippled through the courtroom. Prescott's face darkened. Enough. His voice was sharp, but his control was slipping. Pam leaned forward, voice steady. With all due respect, Your Honor, I'll stop when I receive a legal justification for this fine. So far, I haven't heard one. A long pause. Finally, the judge exhaled sharply. Mark the fine as pending review. Pam smirked. I'll take that as a temporary victory. But she wasn't done yet. The real fight had only just begun. Judge Prescott's face remained unreadable, but the way he shifted in his chair said everything. He had expected quiet compliance, not a full-blown constitutional challenge. The air in the courtroom crackled with tension. Every pair of eyes was locked on Pam, watching, waiting. She had drawn a line in the sand. Now the judge had two choices: stand by a weak justification and risk humiliation, or find a way to backtrack, without losing control. But Prescott wasn't one to back down easily. Miss Bondi, he started, voice measured. Courtroom rules exist for a reason. If I allow one form of personal expression, I open the door to all of them. Pam pressed her lips together. You mean like the wedding bands half the attorneys here are wearing? Or the lapel pins you allow on government officials? Prescott's jaw tightened. She didn't stop. Or, how about when you allowed a defense attorney to wear a pink ribbon for breast cancer awareness? You had no issue with that. Murmurs spread among the spectators. Prescott shot a glare, but the damage was done. Pam sat back, arms crossed. So tell me, Your Honor, why does this rule apply only to my cross? The silence was deafening. Prescott had enforced an unwritten rule based on personal bias. And now, it was crumbling beneath him. Pam let out a slow breath, setting the tablet down. This was exactly the kind of vague, non-committal response she had expected, one that didn't take a firm stance, but subtly suggested that she had overstepped. But she wasn't about to back down now. Lauren shifted uneasily. There's more. Pam raised an eyebrow. More. Lauren nodded and tapped on the screen again. Judge Prescott has apparently filed a formal complaint against you. Pam leaned forward, scanning the document. A complaint. He was trying to turn this around on her, likely accusing her of disrupting his courtroom or undermining his authority. A classic power move. Pam smirked. Well, if he wants to play that game, I hope he's ready for what comes next.